Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Clemency and Other Remedies on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and the Clemency Board and the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens Affairs. Thank you for coming. And the reason that we have you here today is because we have individuals in our community and that are locked behind prison walls that are DC residents all over this country, that who have transformed their lives. And we're looking at ways how we can support them and gaining their freedom. In addition to that, there are individuals that are in our community that are not only have transformed their lives, but they are also saving lives, providing employment, all kinds of work to improve the quality of life of district residents all across the district. And again, I am Lamont Curry, Director of the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens Affairs. And my role in this position is to help returning citizens, whether they have been released 1 minute ago or if they have been home for over several decades, on successfully moving around barriers to be on a pathway to the middle class. And we do that in several ways. We assist them with everything from IDs, birth certificates, social security cards, to getting back in education and skill building opportunities, as well as employment. So if you didn't know and you're watching this for the very first time, the district is one of the most progressive places in this country. If you live from the left or the right, you'll lose rights that DC residents currently exercise as returning citizens. From everything from being able to vote soon as you come home to being able to vote if you have several life sentences. Our goal is to make sure that returning citizens and DC residents incarcerated stay engaged, have every opportunity that they can to build up their skill sets and be an asset, not only to themselves, but to their families and to the district at large. So again, I welcome you for one of the most exciting events that you're gonna get to experience, because we're gonna need your help in being able to connect with individuals who can flourish in this opportunity in their pursuit of reductions of their sentences and be on a pathway to the middle class. And I'm gonna bring up my sidekick tonight, Mr. Patrick Canavan. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening. Thanks, Mr. Carey, for that warm introduction. I can't tell you how thrilling it is on a weeknight to see this many people come out for a meeting on clemency. It's really a testament to the wonderful community that we live in and to the options that the Clemency Board is able to bring to the table. So I want to just say good evening and welcome on behalf of the Clemency Board. We hope that tonight you really are able to learn more about the options that are potentially available to returning citizens in the district, as well as our incarcerated loved ones with DC code offenses through the Clemency Board and through other means. I am not a lawyer. We know that clemency is a pretty complex area of the law, so we wanted to connect the community with people who know this stuff by heart and who make their livelihood doing this work. And so we really hope that the goal tonight is that you get as much insight and information as you can. We have some great speakers for you, so I want to jump right into them. But before I do, I want to go over a few housekeeping matters. The first thing is, it's pretty obvious to everybody that we have a camera in the room. No one in the audience will be on the camera. It is here solely for presentations and presenters. The reason we're filming tonight for the presentations is that we hope to be able to provide this information online at a later time for those who are not able to join us in person. So please turn off your phones to silent or to vibrate, and if you step out, and please step out if you need to take any calls. If you need to step out for any reason, we ask that you use the exits so that we don't interfere with the camera. Once the presentations are complete, the presenters will take questions from the audience. And we'd ask that you hold those questions until the end, where we'll have a Q&A session. The Q&A session will not be recorded, so that you should feel free to ask any clarifying questions that you want at that time without it being recorded. If you have any questions, you can use your cell phones to type down questions, and we'll, if you need a pen or paper, you'll see our folks, the many staff here tonight in green shirts. We have a great showing, and we appreciate that. Who they can provide you with pen and paper if you need it. There's also granola bars, some water, and some snacks over there. If you'd like to enjoy that, please do. So with that being said, we're going to move right now to the importance of clemency, and Mr. Norman Brown.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a long time coming event for the District of Columbia. I'd like to thank the Mayor, Morka, and all of those who have allowed us to be a part of this very important event. Many people in the city are not that familiar with the clemency or the pardon process. It's a very important process. I'll give you, in my short period of time, the value of why clemency and the pardon is so important. As I stated when I came on, my name is Norman Brown. I've been home now since 2015. I was fortunate enough to receive clemency from President Obama in 2015 after serving 24 and a half years of incarceration for a nonviolent drug offense. However, from that sentence that I received, I had 3 life sentences, which means by the federal law, it means that I would have died in prison. Let alone, it was a blessing that I was introduced to the clemency and the pardon process after all of the remedies that I had used, from appeals, Supreme Court, 2255s, all of the avenues that you use to try to get some form of relief from any sentences that you receive, either federal or state. And when I say state, I'm talking about 007 Superior Court, for those of us who are from the District of Columbia. In the process of me receiving the type of sentence that I received, and when I ran out of all of my remedies, there was an article that came out in the Washington Post, maybe in 2000, if I can remember properly, it came out in maybe like 2007, 2008, when there were a lot of what they call rubber stamping that they considered taking place in the pardon attorney's office. And what rubber stamping was actually meaning was that people of color was putting in applications and putting in clemency applications and pardon applications. There was an investigation that was launched on the pardon's attorney's office. So when I spotted that as a drowning man reaching for a spider web, and you know how frail a spider web is, it ain't gonna hold you up. But if you drowning, you'll reach for anything that'll save your life. So in the process of me following through on that article, I began now to reach out to attorneys. Let me back up a minute. In my desperation of having 3 life sentences, what I did, a buddy of mine who was working in a law library, he said, "Hell, Norman, won't you just fill out an application for a pardon or clemency?" And I said, "Well, what is that?" And he said, "Man, it's a release that you can get that will come from the president. You're a federal inmate, and the president can give you clemency." I said, "Well, what is it based on?" It's based on the fact that you have exhausted all of your remedies. You are looking for some relief. You have done some things that could help you rehabilitate your life. But look at you, man. You're in here putting together programs for wardens from different facilities to another. You working with younger people, you working with older people, you doing this through the psychology department. I said, all right, what the heck, I'll fill it out. So I'm trying, man. I didn't know nothing else to do. So that's that spider web. So I filled it out. In 2002, I filled it out on my own. So it took so long to get a response back that I had even forgot that I filled it out. So from 2002 to up to like 2006, I hadn't heard anything. So I had forgot until I got a letter back in the mail saying that I was denied. I got it back. I said, well, what is this? So I opened it up. Pardon's office, what is? And it said, oh, Mr. This is to inform you that your application was denied, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, okay. I had forgot anyway, because I was moving on with my life, trying to figure out another route. So as I went on, it got down to like 2000 and maybe 2010 is when the article came out. So what I did, I started writing to all of these pro bono attorneys that had signed on to an initiative that President Obama had put out called the 2014 Clemency Initiation. Am I naming that right, Liz?
Got it.
I got it? Okay. And what I did was I filled out my application and I put it in again on my own. But this time I was a little more in tune because not only did I put it in, I added all of my accomplishments that I did while I was in. I did 24 and a half years and never caught what we call a shot or incident report while I was in jail. Thank you. And that is pretty challenging for those of us who have done time and just for those of us who had not done time. But my whole mindset was on the fact that I was trying to be a prototype of what rehabilitation could look like. And in the process of me doing that, and in the process of me being in so many different type of events and working with people, I told people a lot of times while I was teaching some of my classes and taking classes that a lot of people was like, Norman, man, you shouldn't be in here, man. You should get another shot. And I said, brother, only God knows that. And until I can get a shot, won't you allow me to live through you when you get out? And they was looking at me like, whoa, what you mean by that? Because it's not that I did not think that I would ever get out. I thought that I would get out someday, but where you can drive yourself mad at while you're in there is trying to pinpoint when that time comes. So what I tried to make sure that I did was I kept hope, I kept working on me, working on others, and being an example to others as what rehabilitation looks like. So if and when the process and the time came, I could be in position to receive the blessing. So what I did was, I said, well, I'm gonna fill it out again. So one of my buddies who had did a long time, he said, I'm gonna work with you. So I filled out the application again, I sent it in. I was fortunate enough to get a group of attorneys that was doing pro bono who looked at my record, who looked at my case and took my case on and said, you look like a prime candidate. So since you put it in on your own, we're gonna take it from here and add you to the 2014 Clemency Initiation. And when I got added to that, one day I was called to the office maybe 3 years after it had gone in, and it was called me to the office, and my unit manager told me, she said, I need you to come back to my office at 11 o'clock. This was 9 in the morning. Now be mindful, throughout that time span, I had lost my mother, my father, my grandmother, and my brother, year after year after year after year. So I'm thinking that this phone call was another death. So I go back in, I go back at 11 o'clock, and I sit on the side of I sit in her office, and the phone rang. And she said, yes, he's right here. And I said, do you want me to give him the phone? So I got the phone. And it was my attorneys. So when I was conversating with my attorneys on the phone, they said, well, Mr. Brown, how you doing? I said, I'm fine. And I'm nervous and my hands are sweating. So I said, well, what's going on? They said, well, we have just received a notification on your clemency. So I said, now you know I've been denied so much that I thought that this might have been one. So I was gearing myself up emotionally to accept the blow. So I said, okay, well, what's going on? They said, well, we're here to inform you that President Obama has accepted your application. So I said, well, I paused. I said, well, what does that mean? Because I needed some clarity. So she said, so the lawyers, they laughing, and I'm like, well, that must be a good thing, because this team here tough. They ain't gonna be laughing if it ain't nothing good. So I said, well, what does that mean? They mean that he has accepted your application, and your release date is November 10th. So I asked again, of what year? Because for the life of me, I just got up off my bed and came in here with with 3 life sentences, and you talking about a November, this was 2015. I said, well, a November of what year? And they laughed, they said November of 2015. So I said, well, wait, hold. So we're talking about the value of clemency. So I said, wait a minute. And I'm looking, and I said, okay, this is July. And I started counting on my finger because I'm so nervous, I couldn't count up here. I'm pretty good with math, but I needed to touch my fingers. So I couldn't see it. So I said, okay, so what do I do next? So they said, well, you don't have to do anything. The warden is putting your paperwork together, this and that, this and that, and this and that. So you could come back to my office in the next hour. So I go back to my room, I sit on the side of my bed. I just want to take y'all on my journey so you would know the value of clemency. So I went in, I sat on my bed, because I had one daughter. She went in, she was in the womb of her mother. When I went back to that telephone and called her, she was 25 years old. So she was in Valdosta State University, and I told her, I said, I need you to pull over. She said, Daddy, what's going on? I said, well, I got something for your birthday, because her birthday was in July. So I said, she said, well, I told you, Dad, you don't got to worry about nothing for my birthday. I said, well, this one I think you gonna want. She said, I said, did you pull over? She said, yes, I pulled over. I said, you sure you pulled over? She said, yes, Daddy, I'm sure. I said, okay, listen, what if I was to tell you that for your birthday, I'm gonna be your present and I'm coming home? She said, she stopped. She said, well, Daddy, you don't play. You ain't playing. What do you mean? I said, well, I just got a call from my attorneys that President Obama has accepted my clemency application and gave me a date to come home for November the 10th of 2015. She like to fainted. She said, Daddy, well, what am I supposed to do? I said, well, baby, you gotta graduate. Just wait right there. I can't wait here. When can I come up there to get you? So I get her off the phone, and I just wanted to share with you what the role of clemency and pardon and how it can change your life. So now, moving right along, remember, this is November, this is July. Do you know that July 30th, I was notified. August 15, I was at Hope Village. August 15th, I was at Hope Village. In 15 days, my life changed like that. And I haven't stopped. I don't have on no seatbelt. The next 4 months, I was tricked to the White House. Liz didn't have anything to do with this at that time. Y'all gonna meet her. But listen, I was tricked to the White House. I thought that I was going to be on a panel and we were going to discuss mass incarceration in the federal or in Washington, in the United States. So I get to the White House. I'm sitting in the White House. It's like about 8 to 9 of us in the White House. And I started seeing people talking in their hands. Did y'all hear me? They talking in their hands, and I'm watching people come out of sliding doors like this. So I said, that person wasn't there just a while ago. Now I'm thinking that my mind playing tricks on me, and that they accidentally let me out. Y'all with me? So I'm sitting in the White House, and then at the time, Mr. Edelman and all types of White House executives was in there, and they was talking to us about clemencies and pardons and what we can do and this and that and this and that. So I'm sitting in there, and I see some notes being passed around to the executive staff. I said, what is going on in here? So I'm looking, and 3 minutes later, President Obama pops out of the door that was like this, and there wasn't no door at first. I want to show you how the White House tricked me. The door slid to the side. He slid out, walked out with his smooth walk, and asked us, he put out and did like this. He said, well, how y'all doing? I'm looking just like you look. And he said, how about if I take y'all to dinner? I said, what did you? Now remind you, I only been out 4 months after 25 years. Can you imagine my mind? So this is us right here at Bus Boys and Poet on 14th Street. We pull up. We're in the back of, I don't know what they call that car? The Beast. But we 4 cars behind the Beast. We got military people in front of us with their hats back. They got these big guns. We in another car. I walked straight out. Can we go back to one picture when we was in the Oval Office right here? He said, let's take a picture first in the Oval Office. Now, here I am so excited. He said, okay, well, let's go get something to eat. I leave out the Oval Office. I'm walking, I go out the door, and I walk straight on the grass. He said, Norman, get off my grass. I'm frozen. I said, what? He said, get off my grass. So I said, oh, okay. So he laughing. I'm like, how you know my name? I said to myself, fool, how you think you got in the White House and he ain't gonna know your name? So, family, listen. I wanted to give you the honors of taking that journey with me. I want to tell you how valuable clemency is, how valuable the pardon process is, and we have to push this. Because if we push it, it lets people know, even though they're out. If you leave returning citizen-friendly Washington, D.C., and you go to New York or North Carolina, they're not as friendly there. So if we're sitting on records, if we're sitting on prior offenses that we have, especially as black men, and we go into other states that are not as friendly, we should utilize the pardon process to get the stuff off of our record. While you're free, it's not as much pressure on you as trying to get a sentence reduction while you're inside. So you don't have anything to lose to follow the process as it will be explained to you throughout this program. Let's follow it. Let's utilize it. But we have to be educated on it so that we can have somebody to walk us through the process. I hope that I took you on my journey. I hope that we will be more encouraged and more inclined to share the process with others so that we can utilize it and we can benefit from it. Thank you. Your faces have been very encouraging to me. I hope I was clear, and I'm so glad to be home to share that with you. Thank you.
So forgive me, I was so back there, wrong, and the Obama experience. But again, thank you, Norman, for all the value that you bring to our community. One of the best things that happened to the district was your release, because not only have you come home and been a trailblazer, but you are also doing a great job to help transforming the lives and redirecting the paths of our young folks. So I very much appreciate you, and once again, welcome home.
Thank you.
So next we will have coming to the mic is Liz Oya, the pardon attorney. Please give an amazing round of applause, because this is the person that oversees the application. Show us some love.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is clemency. Norman Brown is a hard act to follow, so next time we do one of these, I'm going to request to go before him. My stories are not as good. I've never met President Obama, but I do want to talk with you about the clemency process and the role that my office plays in that process. I'm a longtime DC resident, and so I'm glad to be talking about to the people of DC about these issues. DC is a little bit differently situated than many states in the country, many other parts of the country, in that all of the clemency process goes through the President of the United States. And that can be daunting. It can be intimidating to put yourself in front of the President of the United States to make a request for clemency. In your case, that might be a case out of DC Superior Court. It might not be a case that seems like it would possibly even get the attention of the President. But clemency can be really important to residents of DC, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to talk to folks in my community about this important issue. So I've got a PowerPoint here. And I'm not sure, are you? Okay, all right, great. So I want to tell you a little bit about where my office is situated. We are within the Department of Justice, and as you probably know, the Department of Justice is the largest prosecuting agency in the country. Nevertheless, our little tiny office over there in yellow, the Office of the Pardon Attorney, is located within the Department of Justice, and we are in charge of reviewing all of the applications for clemency that come from around the country and making recommendations to the President about which ones he should be granting. I want to also, I forgot to introduce my colleague, Frances Walters, from the Office of the Pardon Attorney, is sitting in the audience, and she and I are both going to be available to answer any questions that folks may have afterwards. So my office, as I said, reviews applications for clemency. There are a couple of different kinds of clemency, and I just want to ask, how many folks in the audience know the difference between a pardon and a commutation? Okay, some. Well, I'm going to explain sort of the different processes for both of these types of clemency and how you can apply for them, what we're looking for in applications for clemency, and try to give you some sense of how you can potentially avail yourselves or help your friends and family to use these remedies. Clemency is a constitutional power of the President of the United States. So in the Constitution of our country, it says that the President has the discretion to grant clemency to any person he chooses, and there are really no rules. He can pick anybody he likes. He can grant clemency to a lot of people, as President Obama did. He can grant clemency to nobody. It's really at the full discretion of the president. So it's an intimidating process, but I want to talk to you a little bit about how it works and what the types of clemency are that are available to you. There are two main forms of clemency. One is a commutation of sentence, and a commutation is what Mr. Brown's talking about. A commutation is a reduction of your sentence of imprisonment. The other type of clemency that is really important is the pardon. In federal law, there's no real remedy for expungement. You might be familiar with that. You can't really get a federal conviction expunged. So a lot of the cases that we deal with in the pardon context are federal cases. DC Superior Court convictions also go through the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and a pardon is a remedy that can essentially relieve you from some of the collateral consequences of your conviction. So a pardon is not an expungement. It's essentially forgiveness from the president for the offense of conviction. And a pardon can help with lots of different collateral consequences that you might be facing from a conviction. It can help you to get your civil rights back, like your right to vote in certain jurisdictions. It can help you to become eligible for government benefits that might exclude people who have felony convictions. So there's lots of benefits to seeking a pardon. We do not get a lot of applications for pardons from DC residents, and it's something that I would really like to encourage folks who are here to think about applying for and encouraging others that you know to apply for. So I want to talk a little bit about the application process for both commutations and pardons and what we're looking for when we review these applications so that you can have a good understanding of how to put your best foot forward if you're seeking these remedies and submit a really good application. I think I've gotten a little bit behind my slides. Could you go back maybe to, okay, perfect. So commutations are, as I said, reductions in your sentence of incarceration, and anyone is eligible to apply who has a conviction under federal law or the DC code. So if you've got a conviction that's federal or under DC law, you can apply for a reduction of your sentence through my office, the Office of the Pardon Attorney. This is a remedy that's for people who are still in custody serving their sentence. So you could be incarcerated, you could be on home confinement, you can be in a halfway house. Anybody who's in some sort of custody of the Bureau of Prisons is eligible to apply for a commutation. Now, how do you have a chance of actually getting a commutation granted is a slightly more challenging question, and also that I want to address. I'm sure that a lot of people in this room know that there have been many changes in sentencing laws that have taken place over the last couple of decades. Since the height of the war on drugs, since the late 80s, 1990s, there have been a lot of sentencing law changes at the federal level that have ratcheted down sentences. There's the First Step Act recently, which ratcheted down certain mandatory minimum penalties, and there have been a lot of changes to the sentencing guidelines and to federal sentencing law that might put somebody who's been serving a sentence for a long time in a position where their sentence would likely be lower today. So that is one big factor that we look at in the analysis for granting commutations. And if you know someone who's in that situation where they were sentenced under a mandatory minimum law that no longer applies today, they would face a lower sentence today, that person may be in a good position to seek a commutation. Other things that we look for are good conduct since the time of the conviction. The process is a pretty involved one in which we receive an application from the individual who's seeking the commutation, and then we collect a number of background documents, including records from the Bureau of Prisons that will have things like your shots, the programs that you've completed, what you've been doing during your time incarcerated, and we're looking for essentially good conduct. It does not have to be perfect. Everybody who works in my office and reviews these applications know that it's easy to pick up a shot, especially in certain security levels of facilities. We don't expect a perfect record, but what we're looking for is some indication in the application that somebody is ready to get back out there and return to the community and be successful and contribute. It doesn't have to be a perfect record. It just has to be a record that demonstrates that someone is deserving of a second chance to get back out there and return to the community. And finally, we're generally looking for a release plan. So we want to know, what are you thinking about doing when you get back out there? Where are you going to stay? Do you have a job in mind? Do you have a way to support yourself? So just what's it going to look like when you get back out in the community? So those are basically the types of things that we're looking at in evaluating applications for commutation. I want to make sure that everybody in this room knows that even though the Office of the Pardon Attorney is situated within the Department of Justice, every single person who works in that office believes in second chances. And we are looking for opportunities to recommend commutation for people. We're looking to be able to create second chances for people like Mr. Brown and many, many others who did not get that clemency under President Obama who deserve that. So my office is filled with individuals who take the work really seriously, review the applications really carefully, and do it with the hope of creating second chances for as many people as we can. The pardon process is a little bit different. A pardon is, as I said, essentially forgiveness for an offense that you've been previously convicted of. And so the procedures are a little bit different for applying. Again, you can apply for a pardon, which is essentially that forgiveness from the president for your conviction if you have a federal case or if you have a case that was prosecuted under the DC Code. The other eligibility requirement there that you should be aware of is that you have to wait until 5 years after completing service of your sentence to apply for a pardon. In very rare cases, you could get a waiver of that 5-year waiting period, but it doesn't usually happen. So generally, you have to wait 5 years. And waiting 5 years is beneficial to your chances of getting a pardon because it allows you to establish a track record of doing well in the community, which would increase your chances of getting considered favorably. So in an application for a pardon, one important thing that pretty much every president looks for, and this is, across the spectrum of politics and policies, is acceptance of responsibility. So it's very hard to seek a pardon if you don't accept responsibility for your offense and essentially apologize, fall on the sword, ask for forgiveness. That's the approach that will set you up best for success in a pardon application. We also look for good post-sentencing conduct. Now, again, part of the reason that people are seeking pardons is, because it's hard to get back out there in the community with a felony conviction that may hold you back from being eligible for certain benefits, from having certain job opportunities. So we don't expect that you get back out there and suddenly, like, you've passed the bar and you're practicing law. We expect that you've gotten back out there and you've given it your best and you've made your best effort to be a good contributor to your community. So that's what I mean by good post-sentencing conduct. I don't mean perfect. I mean you've made your best effort under the circumstances to be a contributor to your community. And then finally, we look for what is your need for a pardon. Why are you seeking a pardon? People seek them for all different reasons, and there are a range of valid reasons. Sometimes people just want that acknowledgement that they've been forgiven. Sometimes people have a really specific reason. Sometimes, somebody may want to pass the bar, become a lawyer, or may want to get some sort of professional license that is going to be very difficult to get with a felony conviction on their record. So it could be a whole range of reasons, but we just want to understand what is your need for a pardon and why should we, bump you up that queue of people who are seeking pardons because it's important to you. So those are sort of some basics. I want to talk a little bit about the logistics of how you apply for these things, and the starting point is the application materials that are provided by my office, by the Office of the Pardon Attorney. We have 2 forms. One is a form for commutation applications, and the other is a form for pardon applications. I've got big stacks of both forms in the back of the room, so if you need one for yourself or for someone else, I've got plenty of them to give you after this presentation. I've also got my 13-year-old son in the audience who knows which one's which and can point you to the right form. if you need some help finding it. I've also got some sort of like cheat sheets, tip sheets about how to complete these forms that go along with each one that you can pick up on your way out if you're interested. So really the only mandatory part of the application is that form, which requests a lot of information, but there are other materials that you can, if you choose, submit along with your application form. One is a personal statement. The application form itself kind of gives you a brief space to answer why are you seeking a commutation or why are you seeking a pardon. But many people write a lengthier letter, and they do it in letter form to the president. Dear President Biden, here's what I want you to know about me. And that's a really smart way to do it because there are a lot of people who are seeking clemency, a lot of people who are asking for this relief from the president. And the president, he's running our whole country, so he's got a lot besides clemency on his plate. So to get his attention and to rise to the top of that pile and be one of the people who, is sitting where Mr. Brown is as a clemency recipient, you have to address the president from your heart and tell him why it is that you have earned that second chance. So I recommend submitting a really thoughtful personal statement along with your application. Now, let me emphasize, you do not need a lawyer to be successful in seeking clemency. And in fact, we don't want to hear in your lawyer's words why you should be granted clemency. We want to hear from you, from your heart. You don't have to be a perfect speller. You don't have to have perfect grammar. It just has to come across as sincere. So I encourage you, if you're seeking clemency or advising others who are seeking clemency, to include that personal statement and to include it in your own words, a sincere statement to the president about why he should give you that chance. You can also submit supporting documents about accomplishments that you may have had if you're incarcerated, certificates for programming you've completed, photos of yourself, your family, that sort of thing. If you're back in the community and seeking a pardon, you can submit supporting documentation from any accomplishments you've had in the community. You can also submit letters of support of your application, and those letters can be incredibly helpful. So not everybody is in the position to get those types of letters, but if you are, it's certainly helpful to have letters from, if you're incarcerated, it might be letters from your family saying, my brother is a great guy and I have a spot for him to stay when he's released, and I'm gonna help him find a job, and I'm gonna support him and make sure he's successful. If you're back out in the community, you might want to include letters from neighbors or friends saying that, you've really proven yourself in any way, as a parent, as a worker, as a neighbor. Really all different forms of letters from many different types of people can be helpful, but I encourage you to consider getting letters of support to submit along with the application. Those can be really helpful. It's not required, but again, it can be really helpful. And the applications can be submitted by mail or by email. Most of the applications that we get from folks who are in the Bureau of Prisons are sent by mail, handwritten, which is absolutely fine. For folks who are in the community or folks who may have an attorney, email is another option. You can submit those to the email address that will be on the forms that I have in the back of the room. There's also a lot of additional information on our website. So if you're interested in learning more about the clemency process and how it works, our website is a great resource. There's all sorts of historical information, names of people who've received clemency in the past, information about the applicable laws and regulations, and the application forms themselves. So you can get a lot of information from our website. Much of that information is also in the materials that I have printed out in the back of the room that you can take with you when you go. I want to talk a little bit about how these applications actually get reviewed. It's a lengthy review process that starts in my office. When we receive your application, an attorney will be assigned from my office to review it and to make an initial recommendation. That recommendation from my office, which will always be signed off on by me, will go to the Deputy Attorney General. She's the number 2 person in the Department of Justice, so she's also got a lot on her plate, but part of her role is to review the clemency recommendations that come out of the Office of the Pardon Attorney. She can agree or disagree, but in either event, the recommendation that comes from my office then goes to the White House, and ultimately it's up to the President to decide. Sometimes we get to the end of an administration, this is what happened during the last administration, and there's a lot of clemency petitions sitting on the president's desk, and the president does not make a decision one way or the other. And then they just go back to the Office of the Pardon Attorney. If that happens, we review them again to determine, are there any changes in the law that might change our recommendation, either favorably or unfavorably? Are there changes in the person's situation? Are there new materials that we've received that give us more information? So we'll then reevaluate our recommendation and send it back up for the next president to review. We have clemency petitions now that have been opened since the Obama presidency. They've been hanging around for a long time. They're ones that didn't get decided by President Obama and then didn't get decided by President Trump and are now on President Biden's desk. So it can be a very lengthy process. If you have an application that's been pending for a long time, you can check the status of it on our website. We won't be able to tell you what our recommendation is or, what discussions are being had about the application, but you can look up using this feature on our website that I've put on the PowerPoint, whether your petition has been granted or denied or whether it's still pending. So if you're worried about whether we've forgotten about you, we haven't, and you can check our website to confirm that. I think, is that my last slide? All right, well, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have after the presentation, and please take the materials because it's got contact information for the office so you can reach out in the future if you have any questions as you're trying to go through this process.
Thank you so much for that really informative presentation. I'd like to now introduce the District of Office of the Attorney General's designee to the Clemency Board, who is Emily Gunston, a member of the Clemency Board with us, and she's going to talk about our processes. Emily?
Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Emily Gunston. I work at our local DC Attorney General's office. I am here in my capacity as a member of the Clemency Board. There's a whole bunch of other folks here also on the Clemency Board. So if I get something wrong, somebody give a shout out and correct me. I'm going to skip this one about commutation and pardon because Liz already covered it. So let me skip to what the DC Clemency Board is. Like Liz just said, because we are not a state, unfortunately, right? The way this would work if we were a state is what would happen in most places is the governor of that state would be able to decide whether or not the person gets a pardon or a commutation. We are not a state, and we didn't have any process in place other than the Department of Justice's process that Liz just laid out. So a whole bunch of folks in DC who care a whole lot about this issue worked really hard and worked with the council and got the council to pass a law that would create a clemency board here in the District of Columbia. So that was created in 2018, and it gives the clemency board the authority to make a recommendation to the president of folks who are applying for clemency. So the way this works, can you skip to the next slide? Really important question is whether or not we can actually grant a person clemency, and the answer to that is no. So, but it's still, I think, a really important process that folks apply through the DC Clemency Board. So let me just take a minute to talk about sort of how that works and why it exists. So as I mentioned previously, there was no process for folks who were convicted of DC code offenses to apply through the DC government, through any entity in the DC government for a pardon or for a commutation. So now that the Clemency Board exists, you can apply to the Clemency Board, and what the Clemency Board can do is review your application, and we can decide as a board whether or not to recommend to the president that you are granted clemency. But a really important thing to know, you can skip to the next slide, thank you. a really important thing to know is that although we have our own application that we created as the DC Clemency Board that's meant to be a little bit more straightforward and the kind of application that we would want to see if we were allowed to decide on our own whether or not you could get clemency, the reality of it is the White House has told us that they won't review a clemency application that's only come through the DC Clemency Board, and it has to go through the Office of the Pardon Attorney. And so a really important thing to know is that if you want to apply currently, until DC becomes a state or until we get some more rights, if you want to apply for clemency or for a pardon, you still have to apply through the Department of Justice using the process that Liz just said, but you should also apply through the DC Clemency Board. And what we can do is write a letter that supplements your application. We'll also send that letter directly to the White House. The law actually requires us to send it directly to the White House. It's just that we know that the White House is not actually going to consider it unless it comes with the package from the Office of the Pardon Attorney. So what we will do is, after we get the application, we'll review the application. There's a bunch of folks who work to review all the background material. We can hold a hearing. And then we decide whether or not to grant or deny the request for the letter. And then we send that letter to the White House, and then we also send it to the Office of the Pardon Attorney. And what the Pardon Attorney's Office has told us is that if there is a letter from the DC Clemency Board recommending that application be granted, that the Pardon Attorney will consider that letter in its recommendation to the White House. So this is a new process, right? It's sort of yet to be seen the weight that a letter from the DC Clemency Board will carry, but we're really, really hopeful that if the DC Clemency Board is also recommending a pardon or recommends a pardon or clemency, that that's something that will be seriously considered by the White House. So we can skip to the next slide. Anything I forgot about that application, folks on the Clemency Board, that I should mention? We'll get to the application at the end. It's on our website. Same thing, you can mail it in, you can email it. It's meant to be relatively simple to fill out. It's just the takeaway I want folks to really come away with is that if you fill out that application, make sure you've also applied through the Department of Justice so that your application can get due consideration by the White House. So these are the folks that are on the Clemency Board. It's set up by DC statute, the DC Council law that passed. It has on the board somebody who actually is a returning citizen, somebody who has expertise in mental health, somebody who has a background in victims' rights, somebody who's an attorney with experience in criminal law, a community member from the district, the Attorney General or his or her designee, that's me, the chair of the committee in our council, the Judiciary Committee, the director of the Public Defender Service or that person's designee, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. Although you should know that in actually considering whether or not to grant an application for the pardon, to recommend that the pardon be granted, the U.S. Attorney's Office, who's the prosecutor in most of the cases, is not going to vote on whether or not we should recommend you for clemency. Next slide. Okay, so one of the reasons why we thought it was really important that folks work so hard to get this Clemency Board created is because traditionally DC residents have not been successful. Folks who have been convicted of DC code offenses have not been successful in getting their application granted. As you can see here, there's only 2 that have been granted since 1989. One of them is Mr. Brown by President Obama in 2013, it looks like. So we're really hopeful that the establishment of this Clemency Board is going to increase the chances that folks who are convicted of DC code offenses will be granted clemency, a pardon, or a commutation by the White House. Okay, these are the criteria for a commutation or a pardon. Again, this is set up by DC statute. This is what makes you eligible for a letter of recommendation from the Clemency Board for either a commutation or a pardon. For a commutation, one, you have to have been convicted of a DC code offense. You have to, for commutation, you have to currently be in custody, which includes probation. Basically, you still have to be under supervision or in custody. You have to have exhausted all your administrative and judicial remedies. You need to be able to demonstrate rehabilitation and the ability to describe, you need to describe how getting commutation would help you achieve your goals. Very similar, obviously, to the things that the Office of the Pardon Attorney also are looking for. For the pardon, similar, DC code offense, you have to have administrated all your remedies. For a pardon, same as for the federal system, you have to wait 5 years after you've been released from incarceration, or if you were never incarcerated, 5 years from the date of your conviction. You have to have not been convicted of any other criminal offense or have any pending criminal charges or be party to a case that's relevant to the conviction for the application seeking clemency. It's not really totally clear yet exactly what that means, but as a general matter, I think that if you think you might be eligible, you should apply, and then the clemency board can figure out whether or not any other convictions are relevant to the conviction for which you're seeking a pardon. Similarly, you have to demonstrate that you've been rehabilitated and to be able to describe why a pardon is important to you. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to apply. On the Clemency Board's website, there's an online application. You can do it either by email, you can download it from our website, and you can mail it in. And this is the address by which you can mail it in. And I'm guessing that somewhere in here we have the hard copy applications. In the back, we have the hard copy applications. So that's it. And I guess we'll do questions at the end. Thanks, everybody.